Hey, it's John McBride, ARM US. We're really excited to reveal to you the actual new enterprise product called the M300. We have been waiting for this one for a very long time with an early release that was supposed to come out in February, and the predecessors that have come before this, the 200, the 100, the 210, all of these put all together to be able to show you a really great unit in which DJI has spent tons of times with uploaded sensors, new features as far as a payload, and those capabilities. So let's get right into it and show you what it's all about. So DJI with the M300 went ahead and put together basically the ability to have a case ready to go, it's got a charger ready to go, and a lot of neat things that are added into this actual enterprise product. But just as far as the hard case, this is a really pretty robust case, wheels, carrying handle, but inside you're capable of putting pretty much 2 batteries as well as the chip and the needed remotes, accessories, and things like that. The charger is separately, which we'll cover here in just a moment, but overall, this is what it looks like on the inside. So we have landing gear stowage up at the top, extra prop bags, a couple of neat things about this case. I'm sure we will see some manufacturers that will create different cases that might be a little bit more usable, but this case is actually well made and definitely keeps everything in the ship. So let's just take the actual ship out of here. One of the things about it is that it's pretty compact when you put it together. So with a flight time of 55 minutes, we're capable of doing actually a huge amount of time, and that is with no payload, just remember that. There's also 14 pounds with the actual batteries installed, so we're able to do that. And as I'm trying to get the landing gear on, as we get a little bit closer look at just how it all is a pretty small little package as far as this portion goes. So I'm just going to flip it over and install the landing gear here. And with that, like I said, 14 pounds altogether. Actually a pretty good sized drone. Definitely a little bit bigger than the M200 or the M210 series. So just with a simple quarter turn, we're locking the landing gear in. This design is actually quite different than the other landing gear on a 210, which I'm very pleased because it doesn't make it very confusing. It's actually fairly easy to push them in. You know when you're locked or not locked in. So that's actually fairly nice. So as we flip it over, that is our front end right there. And just to unfold the props here, we've got a prop holder that is a bit kind of tight as far as getting it apart, but I do like this design simply because, again, it keeps it in a very small little package. So very neat design there. So let's just go ahead and unfold this. We're going to go 2 pieces at a time. And again, this gets a little bit tight, but let's try to get that unfolded. Now, there might be different ways to do this, and that's okay as people figure out a fast way to deploy this, but I did want to make a note that it isn't quite as just slap it up and throw it together kind of a thing. We just want to make sure that none of the arms hit each other and damaging the props or the arms or any of the pieces there. And then up on the front end, I'm just going to show you the locking mechanism here, which is very similar to the 200 and the 210, is that we have basically lining it up and then doing a quarter turn to lock it. So that's pretty much the same thing as any of the other 210 and 200. We do want to be very careful because it's very fragile up here, putting any weight or load on that. So we just want to be a little careful. But overall, super awesome. The whole thing has an IP45 rating. That's actually a pretty big one. And the payloads, with retrospect to those, they actually are capable of doing IP ratings as well. Again, we'll discuss that in the payload section. One thing about it, this thing has a ton of sensors, like a ton of sensors. So the reason why the props are upside down and being able to unfold here, they're almost as big as M600 props. The big reason why this is important for the props to be on the bottom is so that you get an unobstructed view with all the rest of the sensors. So we've got several up in the front. We've got infrared as well as optical sensors on the side. We have them in the rear. We have them on the bottom. So even on the bottom here, we have plenty of sensors that are running all around for a 360 unobstructed view. And that's kind of why the reason the design of having this flipped upside down. Up on the front end, we do have our antennas, which actually talk to our radio system. And then on the back, all of them are going to actually have the RTK system built into them. Whether you activate this with simply buying the DRTK ground station, these are actually available on all of the units moving forward. That also makes it simpler so we don't have several, again, different versions. This might be added in the cost because it might be a little bit more expensive, but overall, having one ship, one system, RTK capable, multi-layered sensors all over the place, and the payload capability on this is going to be awesome. One of the things about it is the FPV camera. So the FPV camera is fixed. It is not capable of moving around, but it has a huge field of view. So at about a distance of a 1.5 to 2 feet, you can actually see the ground, but you're not able to tilt this one. But what it does include is actually a HUD system in there that allows you to see a horizon movement. You can point at different things that is actually active. You can actually work with it. So as far as a second operator operating the payload versus the primary operator flying the machine, you can definitely separate those two jobs, if you will, and have that capability, and as well have some neat things that allow you to do two-person flying. So on top of here, we have a couple of power ports. This will be up on the top. You can open those up and they're USB-Cs. There is one that actually has where you would update the actual ship. And then on the bottom, which we're not too clear yet, and I want to make sure everybody understands that this is a demo version, but here on the bottom, we actually have the connection for the payload. Likely coming is a 2 payload section, just like a 210. But down here on the bottom, we also have another payload port, if you will, that you can then connect. And it seems to me like there's this mysterious bracket space. So we'll figure out what that is coming along a little bit later. So let's take a look at the way the batteries actually come in and out of here, and then we'll move on to actually discussing the batteries. So as far as the batteries go, they are hot swappable. That's a big one as far as public safety goes. So being able to use these batteries, and again, we'll talk about the details of them, but I just wanted to show how they actually fit into the machine. So same thing with the similar ports in which they use and utilize on the rest of them. We need to be a little bit careful to make sure that we're not jamming anything in these and they stay clear. But once you've paired them together, decide which one's going to go where. It's just a snug fit right like that. Put in our second battery. Once our battery's in, these have the same similar buttons in which you can just touch real quick to check your voltage, but once they're in, we're going to lock this right here, and that keeps our battery. So there's no mechanical lock really to lock the batteries or eject them like before. And then up on the top, we have our power button, which is right there. So just like every DJI ship, press it once, hold it down, and you're powered on and ready to go. So let's talk a little bit about these batteries and the battery chargers. Let's talk a little bit about these batteries and the new batteries. So good things, bad things. Of course, everybody hates the fact that you have to buy new batteries, especially when batteries are fairly expensive, but the ship is going to require a lot more different actual voltage operational, and then as well as they're a bit bigger as far as the batteries go. So let's just couple specs on that. But similar stuff as far as the DJI stuff goes. Again, port on the front here, very similar. Don't want to get any debris or anything inside. We have a push button right here to tell us our cell voltage. So just one push to give us an idea between the cell voltage or the state of charge basically. And then these batteries are 5935 on the milliamps, 12 cell. So the other batteries are 6 cell on the 210-200, but these are a 12 cell battery which runs 46.2 volts nominal, and that's actually a really big number as far as capable RPMs on the motors, which again give you much larger props. And when doing flying with these, I noticed that at most of the time, I mean, all the feedback coming back is actually the same as everything else. So there's not much different. These actually are self-heating, so you can do that. They have a self-heating feature inside for cold operation. And as well, as far as the charger goes, and this is the one thing about it, this is the charger. This isn't an add-on or a purchase of extra dollars. This is the charger. So this is the BS60 Intelligent Flight Battery Charging Station. So I'm going to just roll this up a little bit. So up on the top here, I have a zipper area to put my AC cord if I need it. And then once I undo this, I open this little safety clip and plug in my AC unit. And this actually keeps me from closing the case once it's plugged in and has power. So I have to remember that. So we have a couple of actual fans here that move air through here. So this is not a charger in which you're just going to close and leave alone. They actually built that in there to keep the charging safe and actually keep the whole unit very cool. On the front of this, we have a power button, nothing different there. You just push the power, and then we have different monitoring for different stations. Let's take a little bit, if we can zoom in a little bit on this, is just this section right here, which correlates basically to each of the bays in which we're able to put the batteries. And then there's 4 additional ones up here on the top. The ones on the top charge the Crystal Sky batteries, because this unit actually does use the Crystal Sky batteries for the radio. Well, again, another thing we'll cover here in just a bit. So with each of the battery bays plugged in, we're not able to do all 8 at the same time, but it does do 4 at a time. So I don't recommend using this as a transport case. What I do say is that you actually separate these batteries and put them in a different case. I'm sure other manufacturers will create something like that to put the batteries into, but we want to be very cautious because there's a lot of wiggle room in here. So when you actually close the lid, you know, being that it moves around quite a bit, I don't think that would be good in an airport or anything else, especially again when you're transporting them around, and the small connectors on the inside. So a little bit, again, closer look on the inside is that we have the same connectors. They don't move around. They're not flexible by any means. So I wouldn't use this as a transport case. That's basically what I'm saying. So as far as all the managing the batteries and actually doing all the updates, this is actually has a USB-C connection up on the front, in which we do the updates to the charger itself. We already did this inside the shop here, so that was fairly easy and simple, and you actually do that through the radio system. So that's a close look at the batteries as well as the charger that comes with the M300. Let's go ahead and take a look at the remote. The remote, basically a smart remote, is being used for the M300. This is very similar in those specs. 1000 nit screen built into the system, then an HDMI out on the top, a USB out. We have a battery adapter that runs 4.5 hours. So on the back of this, as far as a new design, we actually have a Crystal Sky battery that connects in the back and allows us to run this forever. So that's great because of that interchangeable capability. It does have its own charger, just like the smart remotes do, so it has its own charger. We're able to transmit this guy 9.32 miles. Let me say that again. 9.32 miles. Make sure you got your waivers for that. That's a huge amount of space, as well as a ton of video transmission and capability there. We have AES 256 encryption, which is pretty common as far as the capability of that. Not very many people are really worried about that, but that is the link between the radio and the actual ship to make sure nothing is being transmitted off of there. We have 1080p at 30 frames per second. Another great actual benefit of this is not transmitting in 720. We're moving at 1080p, 30 frames per second, and the most coolest, best feature of all, we have a handoff feature and as well as a trainer mode. So with 2 radios, I can basically be downrange that 9 miles, hopefully you have the waivers again, and being able to transfer this over to another operator. So that is actually a really new feature. Haven't been able to test this yet, but with this capability, this opens a lot of doors with even just doing smaller transmission changes, is just going from one basically electrical tower to the next electrical tower, and just being able to still keep an eye on your bird while changing it between operators. So it's not much different. Like I said, just looking at the physical portions of it, we have the same screen. We do have this unit on the bottom, which actually, again, when we take our Crystal Sky, drop it in here, it's got a locking mechanism just like the rest of the Crystal Sky systems. Basically all in the Crystal Sky, as well as the Sentence remote. Same stuff. Up on the front, we actually have like a new type of connection in which we can use this little neck strap that comes with it. A little bit different as far as this design, nothing that I was super crazy about, but it does do a great job supporting the weight. So in 3 contact points, we have 1 at the bottom and then 2 at the sides with the neck strap. We can actually do a lot of hands-off operations if we're picking up and grabbing anything like that. So it's a little bit different as far as this design, but overall, all of those features are there. And the big one is, again, being able to do 1080p through the transmission, as well as having that available battery on the back to operate this for a long time. So that finishes this part of the actual remote controller and everything else. Let's talk a bit about those payloads. Okay, so as far as the payloads go, we have a brand new payload system called the H20, also the H20T. So we have the standard version with a 23 times hybrid optical sensor, 20 megapixel, and then a fixed sensor on the front end that is like 12 megapixel with 24 millimeter equivalent. We have a rangefinder on the front of both of them with a optical, or with a capability of reaching out to 1200 meters, so 3 to 1200 meters. As far as the physical side of it, so here I've got the H20T. So the T is the thermal version of this, so brand spanking new. And we take a look at that. It's got its own case, but one of the things I wanted to mention is that this does fit into the DJI case if you actually do have both of these sensors. So up here on the front end, if we take off our little cover, we have that 23 times optical zoom, 20 megapixel on this one, and then the actual rangefinder. Again, let me flip that over. You can see the rangefinder camera right there. Our rangefinder itself, and then the secondary optical camera on the front. And then this being the T with the thermal camera. Some of the thermal specs here, 640 by 512. It is radiometric, 8 times digital zoom. So we've got the 2, the 4, and the 8 times digital zoom with the 640. And the lens profile on this is a 13.5 millimeter. We also want to note that this is, again, radiometric as well as 30 hertz. So very cool sensor as far as capability goes. And as far as running this, we have a lot of features that work where all of these sensors together can do some fantastic things as far as this H20 and the H20T. So these will not, unfortunately, be capable of working on the 210. But what is awesome is that what is capable of still working on the M300 is the Z30 and as well as the XT2. So both of these are still capable of running on the actual M300, and I'm super happy about that because I think a lot of the public safety guys are going to end up buying the ship. They may not be able to buy the new H20T right off the get-go, but we do have these other available sensors that are backwards compatible as far as the M300 is concerned. So super excited about that. Some of the other things about this one, again, IP44 rated as far as this unit goes. So the ship also being up in the higher IP ratings allows you to do some pretty neat stuff. So I'm really excited about that. We do want to, again, say that unfortunately not the compatibility with the X5S, the X7, the X4, these just don't have those internal SD cards that are capable. These are all running SD cards separately. So let's take a look at the actual HUD system and as well as the application and what we're going to see as far as this new pilot app. Okay, the primary flight display, basically what we're seeing on here, the pilot app, and what we're actually, the HUD that actually shows up is what we'll be discussing here on this part. So overall, you've got the standard stuff. So we've got pilot app basically on the front with a mission planner section as well. But on the sidebar here, we have the album and the HMS. So that's a little bit of the back end data side. Well, everything else looks very similar as far as the app goes. We have the same monitoring and the same capable checklist that's there. So it's very, very similar. Might be some small changes that you might see here. But overall, the actual HUD is a little bit different. So the big one is on the bottom here, and I'm just going to turn our camera here. So our gimbal operation works just like any other gimbal, left and right, up and down. And we can do that from the controller, or we have the touchscreen capable part. So we touch it and move it around. So that's totally feasible. So totally capable. But on the HUD itself, I mean, that's kind of the interesting thing. Up on the front end here, right in the middle of the display, is actually the radar. So on the radar, we can see different things moving around as we check and how that kind of sees what is seeing and displaying that on the radar. But the one that I thought really neat here as far as new features goes is a heading. So if we pick up and just kind of rotate the machine, we see a compass heading actual change. So there is actually a compass heading change there that I actually think is really neat as far as what direction the ship is going, which it didn't do before. And then as well as we have the actual payload settings on the side. And this one, we're running the HT, or the H20T, and we have a wide view that we can select. We have the zoom view, which we were just in. We click on the zoom and wide, so we can alternate those back and forth utilizing the two RGB cameras. And then we have the IR camera up on the front. IR allows us to also do a couple of touch screen on the actual temperature. We have zoom capabilities we had talked about earlier. And, you know, like I said, just the overall capability of this is pretty neat, pretty intuitive. We'll spend a little bit more time on this one, actually getting deep into the guts of it and doing another recording showing you exactly that. But first, I got to get used to actually how the whole system works together. So super excited to get it up in the air. So that's our first look at the actual demo unit we got from DJI on this M300 as well as the H20T. We have a lot of other new stuff coming to let you know. The actual webinars that we have scheduled that we've been using our ArmUS education portal for. A lot of this information will not be available but to those subscribers. So make sure you subscribe and you sign up for the ArmUS education portal. So on May 8th will be our first webinar announcing the platform and looking a little bit more in depth with the actual use of it as well as the capabilities. And we'll be bringing in a DJI representative, somebody high ranking, to tell us a little bit more about it. On May 15th we have a deep dive webinar on also with a DJI rep that will take a little bit closer look at some of the workflows, the payloads, as well as on May 22nd we'll be doing a webinar, a flight webinar showing you flying capability of the bird. So join us at the ArmUS Education Network, sign up there, and from there you'll be able to register for any of the upcoming webinars and classes that we are able to give you. Thanks again for joining us on this video and the initial unboxing of the M300.
Perfect.